Hey guys, this is Isaac from Contender Bicycles, and I'm joined here with Joseph and Carter. Today we'll be talking about the trail bikes we got to ride down in St. George. We had the Santa Cruz Hightower, the Orbea Occam, the SCOR 4060 ST, and we also had Scott's new Genius. We got a chance to ride about all these bikes, and now we're going to give you some of our opinions about them and what we thought.
The Genius was sort of like an all-rounder. Like, I wouldn't say it really excelled in any one specific scenario, but it wasn't bad in like any scenario. Like I will say though, the twin lock is pretty necessary to make that bike a good climbing bike. Trying to pedal that thing up a hill without the twin lock on was brutal. Like there's a bunch of pedal bob and everything. So like it's a 150 bike, but I'm glad they put the lockout on it, or else it would have been a lot worse.
I know a lot of people hate on Scott for putting lockouts on bigger travel bikes, but on that bike it definitely made sense. Like Santa Cruz with their VPP system, the tension from the chain when you're pedaling is what keeps pedal bob from happening, because it puts tension on the rear triangle and it keeps pedal bob from happening while you're pedaling. That such system does not exist, or like an pedal bob or an anti-squat system doesn't really exist on the Genius, and the solution to that is the twin lock. I think climbing without it was not great, but when you climb with it on, it was pretty efficient.
I mean, to that I would say ideally the solution to that would not be a lockout, and it would, have something else to keep from bobbing, but it's one solution.
Yeah, it's true, but also the fact that they didn't use, because most systems use chain tension from the pedals to keep the rear triangle from doing under pedal bob. But that also means that when you're descending and you hit like chattery terrain, you get pedal kickback. So using a lockout instead of like a standard like anti-squat system does prevent the pedal kickback in happening.
The good thing too about it is you don't have to design the suspension with that in mind either. You can sort of just do whatever you want for the suspension design. I don't love all the integration on the Genius either. It's a lot of stuff routed through the headset that I feel like is almost overly complicating things on especially like a big trail bike where like you're likely gonna have to like work with it and play with it.
It helped that the bike we had was Axis, but it can get complicated fast for sure.
Yeah, well, I did like the Genius though. It was a fun bike. Like,
it was fun.
It wasn't as chargy as like a Hightower. It didn't like really push over the bumps as well as that, but like definitely for like an all-around, all day in the saddle trail bike, it did everything pretty well. Like I took it off some pretty decent sized drops and it was comfy. It was fun.
Yeah, it's a fun bike. It's got huge tire clearance too, which is really awesome. I think it's like definitely if you were like a person who wanted that super futuristic look, those clean frame lines, and you like to be on the cutting edge of technology, the Scott's definitely the bike for you. But if you're also somebody who wants to be more of a home mechanic and you don't know how to operate on like things like internal routing through the headset or the internal rear shock, it may not be the best decision. But for people who want that futuristic look and to be at the forefront of like cutting edge technology from Scott, it's definitely a great bike to go with that.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to keep in mind when buying it though, because it's pretty difficult to get a good stem for it, just because it's the integrated stuff. So you can run other stems, but then you lose a lot of like the clean lines and stuff.
Yeah.
And then if you have, let's say, like a more unconventional fit, like you need a super big riser bar or something like that, or a slightly longer stem, then it can't get their one-piece cockpit, and you sort of have to look at other brands and they don't have a positive rise stem anymore. It's all like 0 degree or less.
0 degree or less, yeah. I think that's like one of the things. It's like that is one of the downsides with having such integration, which while it looks good and it makes for a great looking bike, if you ever wanted to do things like switch bar, height and rise and change your fit, and you wanted to still keep the clean lines of the bike, you're pretty much stuck to whatever Scott and Synchros makes.
Granted though, we're talking about this because we work in a bike shop, so we're always changing our bikes because we have nothing better to do. As a bike that you just want to be like set up once, it's definitely a great thing for that, because with all the integration and stuff, it's really clean. It's easy. And then it's like, if you know exactly what you want and the bike is comfortable and there's no reason to swap your bar, then it's great because you have it
Because then it
set
works,
up
and then it's stiff
nice.
and it's responsive.
That is the nice thing about that one-piece bar, is super stiff.
Super stiff and responsive. It made the front end of the bike handle fairly nimbly, considering it was an alloy wheel on a big fork with a big tire. So it did help that front end feel a little bit more nimble.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Genius?
I mean, I think we've covered it all pretty much, but yeah, it excels in some areas, if you're into those areas, and not so much other. I wouldn't call it like a good all-rounder bike, but there's other bikes that we tested that might be a better all-rounder.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun.
I think if you wanted to have a bike to do like pretty crazy trail bike adventures on, like you want to go explore some pretty gnarly lines, but let's say those lines are hard to access and you're going to end up riding with a pack for 5 or 6 hours, that'd be a pretty sweet bike to do it on, because you could ride your suspension soft and get great traction in the descent, and then you could just lock it out for the climbs.
Yeah.
I know some of my favorite trails require climbing fire roads and ski resorts to get to the top of, and that sucks. And so having something like the Genius where you can lock it out for those climbs is nice, just to be able to hit it right there on the bar. So
Yeah. I daily rode a Scott Ransom, which had the lockout on it. And the great thing about that was, because it had the lockout on it, I could ride it up Park City with people on cross country bikes and not feel that terrible. And then have a really fun descending bike while they're all trying to struggle down some rock gardens. Like the lockout is good. I'm a fan of it. I know Carter might disagree with me, but he's more of like a DH park boy.
I pedal too, but mostly I just don't like I would like the efficiency when I go to pedal, but I just can't stand the clutter on the bars.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my style.
It's also another part that might break.
That too.
that too.
And also just another thing to think about. I don't want to think too much when I ride.
Yeah.
And speaking of bikes you don't want to think about though, simple, we go to the Hightower, which is probably the simplest bike we rode. It's not much to it. It was very, very easy to maintain. Everything on it super simplistic, as most Santa Cruzes are.
Yeah. It now has a touch with the frame storage, which is super nice to have.
Yeah.
It's not a big thing on a bike to have storage, but when you have like your entire down tube ready to be filled with whatever, your jacket, snacks, Red Bull if you need, it's great, because like that means you might not have to ride with a pack. And personally, I hate having stuff on my back when I ride. I'd much rather just be as my body as decluttered as possible, try to fit everything on the bike, and having a nice safe place where you can carry a lot of stuff is a huge plus for me, at least.
There's a time and a place for packs and vests and hip packs and such, and I get that, but I hate wearing those things. There's something about it that really bothers me. I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but having the frame storage is a huge plus for that, because you can go from being able to ride, a little bit with your bottle in your cage and maybe a seat bag. Also, if you were running a seat bag before, it prevents you from needing to run a seat bag, because you can sub all your tools in your frame, which not only does that mean it's not just outside of the bike and it looks better, but I've also heard of people on size small bikes having issues under full compression of the rear wheel hitting their seat bags and droppers and ripping them off. So it also prevents from that being an issue, which isn't an issue for the majority of riders, but if you're a smaller rider, that is a minor thing to think about.
But even people on XLs with a 175 mil dropper post can run into that issue.
That's true.
One thing I will say about the Hightower, kind of going away from the frame storage, I was amazed with how well it climbed.
Yeah. I think when I first bought the bike, I was expecting it to be a pretty bad climber. I was coming off of lots of cross-country bikes, that's what I've been riding, and I was expecting my first ride on it to be not happy with the way it climbed, and it blew me away with how well it climbed. I guess that's kind of adding on to the whole rhetoric of trail bikes nowadays, where everybody talks about nowadays. Trail bikes have come such a far way, they climb so well now. But even just more hammering that in, they really do perform way better now than they used to.
The Hightower is also the slackest bike that we tested.
Yeah,
for the trail bikes. And so that was another surprise for me, was how well it climbed, even being the slackest bike, even being a bike that's more focused on going straight down a downhill, blazing over the rocks and stuff. It did all that, but then when pedaling up a climb, the VPP, he was talking about earlier, it does work well.
It works super well.
I'll give it to Santa Cruz. There's the other thing about Santa Cruz is all the bearings are standard across all their bikes, so they're easy to find, lifetime bearing and frame replacement, and just like super solid construction for a bike.
They're all oversized bearings, and another great part is that none of the bearings on the Hightower or any of Santa Cruz's VPP bikes are located in the frame itself. They're all located inside the linkage, which means that if your bike gets dirty, let's say you're not the best at maintaining your bike in the future, it doesn't creak. Because you get a lot of bikes that get some creaking to it because the raw carbon fiber frame on the bearing itself, some dirt gets in there, and as your suspension pivots, it makes creaking noises. That's really common on most bikes that have linkage that's contained inside the frame. But because all the bearings and the linkage of the Hightower and all VPP bikes is inside the linkage, it creates a lot less of a problem for noise and such. Yeah. It also means bearing replacement's easier because you just pull at that one link and then punch them all out, put it back in, put the link back in.
You might still run into a little bit of creaking just because the cranks and the fork and bikes creak. So it'll creak less, but if it starts creaking on you, bikes creak. Carter, what do you have to say on the Hightower?
Overall, it climbed well, it descended well, it looks good.
It's a good looking paint job.
So I'm a big fan of it. I had fun.
Yeah.
Sweet. It was definitely the bike I was able to push the hardest in the descent.
Granted, do you think there's any bias that you've been riding that bike for 8 months and the rest?
Yes, that is totally true. I'm familiar with the bike because I had already owned it for a little bit, which means I knew how it worked. But with the steeper head angle, you did compared to the other bikes, I felt like I could push it more aggressively. Though it didn't climb technical, really techie stuff as well as the rest of the bikes because that long wheelbase and that slacker head angle means you kind of had to really lead the front wheel up techie stuff. So that wasn't my favorite, but it also meant when you wanted to do steep terrain or drops, it can take it. So.
Yeah. And even the big hits off the drops, it's not as knee impacty as some of the other bikes. So, and just not having to push the bike out as far in front of you, anything like that. Yeah.
The SCOR I felt was very similar to the Hightower in terms of being an all-around trail bike, but it's got a steeper head angle and it's got way shorter chain stays. And it made the bike kind of squirrely in a way I really liked. It was I felt like the SCOR was probably another one of those really capable trail bikes we had on hand, just like the Hightower, but just not quite capable. You could push it into the same situations as the Hightower, but once you got into that kind of rowdy situation like the Hightower, you felt more sketched out on it, which is some people would be like, oh, that's bad, I don't want to be sketched out. But I felt like when I got to the bottom of the hill, I had a much bigger adrenaline-induced smile on my face because it was kind of squirrely and it was fun. The big thing.
In my opinion, the Hightower feels more like you're relying on the bike to do the sections.
Yeah.
When riding the SCOR, it felt like the SCOR was pushing you to be a better rider to get through the sections.
Yeah.
The SCOR was super capable, but then it also felt like it was urging you to really be on top of the bike, really be riding the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to think about riding a lot on it, but that's not a bad thing. It was super nimble, it was playful, and so it was a really fun descender. There was a little bit more line choicing with it because you can't just blow through everything. But the SCOR and the Hightower, I'd say, are pretty much the same capabilities wise. Just the SCOR really urges you to push yourself rather than to push the bike.
And SCOR's whole thing is make fun bikes, not the fastest bikes to race. You wouldn't want to race a SCOR necessarily, but yeah, mission accomplished. They're very fun.
It was a blast.
One thing, there's two things that I love about the SCOR. One's really small, one's pretty big. I love that they put a derailleur hanger in your frame for a spare. I haven't seen any other bike brands do that, and that's a really awesome thing to have just on there. The other thing, you can just do relatively not that much work and make it a completely different enduro bike because you can just flip the head cup. You have to get a longer stroke shock and fork or extend your fork out. Yeah. But you can make that bike for a lot cheaper than buying a new bike, a 170, 160 enduro bike. Say you hate the trail riding and you want to have a really capable enduro bike. Or even if you have the enduro option and you want less travel, you can swap it back. And I think that's a really cool design piece that SCOR did, because it's 2 bikes in one if you really want to.
Different shock stroke, but with a flip chip, different shock stroke, then a different fork or extending your fork. Yeah, you got an enduro bike, which is really awesome. I will say though, if you're going to include frame storage on a bike, because they include the frame storage with that little compartment in the derailleur hanger, which is awesome, because a lot of bikes come with derailleur hangers, but nobody puts them inside the frame. I would have liked to see more room than what they put in there, because there's enough room for the derailleur hanger and maybe like a tube or multi-tool, but that's it.
Not a tube.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
I think if you
I
got
a multi-tool.
I think if you fold
a road tube,
a
tube Alito.
One of those really thin ones, maybe.
Yeah, latex tube.
You could do like you could do latex tube or a multi-tool. I would have liked to see, if you're going to include frame storage, make it like you can store more things in it. I think is the rhetoric there.
It's also not waterproof. Water can get in there.
It isn't. I did not know that.
So if you live somewhere where it's raining and you're out in the mud a lot, you're gonna get some mud in there and some water.
And so your multi-tool might rust.
Yeah, your multi-tool might rust. So that's one thing to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Should we talk about the last guy, the Orbea Occam?
Orbea Occam. That one was also priced. Those ones priced for componentry. The Occams are also spec'd kind of similarly. Like some of the top end Occam LTs use factory suspension, carbon frame, carbon bars, but then they use XT drivetrain, alloy wheels, and XT brakes. Yeah. Same kind of thing. Feels like it was spec'd by mountain bikers for mountain bikers.
Yeah. Really awesome. One thing that the Orbea Occam, it was definitely the best climber in the group by far.
Yeah.
But I will say it felt more like a long travel XC bike rather than a full blown trail bike to me. Like it was super nimble, super responsive, but like if I was going down to Moab and I was going to be doing big hits all day, like a lot of trail bikes should be able to do, like whole enchilada, I probably wouldn't want to be on the Occam.
The Occam kind of felt like the cross-country riders like trail bike, or the opposite direction, the enduro riders cross-country bike. It's like, for having 150 millimeters of travel in the front, 140 millimeters in the rear, and having a coil shock, it did not feel like it had that much travel. It felt like a 130 travel bike. It was, agreed, by far the best and the most nimble climber we had. It was the best climber in technical sections. On sections of so-called downhill that were a little bit flatter but were pretty technical, it was by far the easiest to coax through areas like that. You can get to hop over rocks, you can get into kind of technical, because sometimes in those sections on bigger trail bikes, you slow down, you kind of get stuck because the front wheel's so far out. The Occam did not do that. But anytime I got on something pretty dang steep or tried to do a drop on it, I felt a little sketched. I felt like I was over the front of the bars pretty heavily. So there was definitely that.
It also felt short to me, like the shorter reach, sort of like a little bit more nimble. There's always like, the bike felt like it wanted to go, but then like in like the big sort of like drop sections of the trail and like the super techie bits, it felt a little like it was in too deep, I guess you could say. Like that bike would be really, really fun to do like a 5-hour day on, in my opinion.
Oh, it's super lightweight, yeah.
Climbs well, descends well, like, but if you're getting a trail bike that you just want to like make it get to the top of something, you don't really care the climbing ability, like you just want to be able to get up there, and you just want to go as fast as you can down the downhill. Probably would like edge you towards a Hightower or like
Genius.
Or a Genius, yeah. What did you think about it?
I think it's perfectly capable of big hits if you want to. That's not going to be the best option, but you can do it. So yeah, like what you were saying, if you're a more downhill oriented rider, maybe don't go with this one. If you're not so worried about the downhills, you just want to do big rides and be efficient, then sure.
Yeah. It kind of felt similar to the Genius in the way, like it felt like a bike you could definitely take on a really long day, just like the Genius could, except the Genius achieves that via lockout and the Occam achieves that by wanting to climb from the beginning without the lockout. So it's like with the lockout off, the Genius climbs worse than the Occam, but it was more capable in the descent than the Occam was.
I wouldn't say it was more capable. I would say it's differently capable.
Yeah.
Because it's like, there's times where it's like you want a bike that's incredibly stable, that you want just something that'll like get you down. But like at the same time, there's times where you're coming down a trail and you want to have the most playful bike.
That's true.
Like if I were to take the Occam, I think I would have a great time on a lot of like big, like sort of lift service bike park areas. Not like they're super techie stuff, but like their flow trails and stuff. I would love to be on the Occam just because you can throw that bike around.
It was the easiest to throw around. It was the most fun to jump, for sure.
Yeah.
It was the most fun to jump. You could throw it around in the air. It was super nimble. I think on flow trails or any like small side hits on more relaxed trails, it would be a blast on for things like that. For a full 29er bike with 140, 150 millimeters of travel, it's very, very nimble, which was really fun.
It does have a pretty steep head angle compared to everyone else.
Yeah, it does.
That's a 66 degree head angle. So it was definitely the steepest, which more nimble. But like for 95% of the population that wants to get a bike just to ride, not necessarily to really push on, like you want to ride your bike, the Occam is an incredible option for that. Like if you're someone like Carter probably who likes really big squishy bikes, maybe not, but
I think also if you live like honestly in this area in Salt Lake, a lot of Bonneville shoreline land trails around here are very smooth and there's not a whole ton of tech to them. But if you wanted to have a trail bike that you could push, but most of your home riding was here in like Salt Lake, the Occam is an excellent option for that. It would be a great Bonneville shoreline bike for things like that.
Yeah, 19th Ave Trail, great on it.
Super fun on the Occam.
All right, should we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's everyone's favorite bike? What would you like to own?
I think if I'm gonna choose one, I would go with the SCOR. I own a Hightower, but I think if I were to do it again, I might go with the SCOR just because while it wasn't as capable in a descent standpoint, I think it was just squirrely enough that it gave me that adrenaline rush and made things super, super fun. Put a little crazy smile on my face. It was a blast of a bike to ride. What about you?
I think I'd go for the Hightower. I really like that bike. It climbed well, it descended really confidently, really well. I'm like, I want to get really good, I want to get better at like super techie stuff, so I want a bike that'll take me and like make it easier for me in the techie stuff. Like if I was probably an incredible bike rider that was confident over any terrain, I'd probably be on the SCOR too. But as someone who wants to get better, because this isn't my normal style of riding, I'd probably go the Hightower.
The Hightower is also a nice companion bike. If you already have a short travel bike on hand, the Hightower is really awesome for that.
Yeah.
So
I really like the Hightower with how it rides, obviously, and its glove box and serviceability, but I don't think I could get past the SCOR and how fun it was. It was just so playful and fun to rip around.
Super fun.
So I'd have to go with the SCOR. Yeah. And that is the SCOR 460 ST.
Yes.
If we didn't mention that before.
yes, the short travel is
Just the
not
short
the long travel one. Yeah, you can make it long travel, but we tested the short travel one.
Yeah.
We do have all these bikes on hand if you guys would like to take a look at them here in our Salt Lake City store or up in Park City, or you can visit us at our website, contenderbicycles.com, and chat us there. If you have any questions, let us know. Thank you so much.